Okay, welcome back. Um, I hope you, I don't know, enjoyed might be too strong a word for the videos and the reflection. I hope you did, but I don't know if homework is ever enjoyable. Actually, I think this class is a ton of fun. I suppose that takes a certain kind of personality, though. And I'm on this side, not on that side. All that. We have a lot of fun stuff to get to today. We're going to talk all about AI, introduce what is it, think a little bit about what we mean when we say AI, and then talk about risks and ethics and course policy. Before I get into new content for today, I wanted to just kind of show you what ChatGPT did for me this morning. Well, collaborated with me on. And so it analyzed all your AI reflections. Those are already graded in terms of the criteria for word count, whether you numbered it correctly, whether you left out the prompts. And it's already read them all and gave me the code to generate the word clouds. So I've already uploaded that cleaned data, so I told it to leave out any prompt words, any filler words, just the kind of normal stuff you would do to make a word cloud that might be meaningful. And then it gave me a Jupyter notebook. So if you've never seen these before, that's fine. This we'll get to next week. But this is so all I did was download it. Actually, having that light right above the screen is probably not helpful. It generated the Python code, put it in a Jupyter notebook, and then I uploaded that to my Google Drive. So that's what you're looking at right now is the Python code it gave me sitting in my Google Drive. I've already uploaded it, so I'm skipping that first cell. But then I tell it the path to the file, run a few cells here where it's just analyzing the frequency of the words, and then it will start generating the word clouds. So this is the kind of thing where I use ChatGPT and I'm still like, man, saved me so much time. And does such a cool job. So first prompt was, what's your prior experience? Probably not too surprising to you. Wasn't surprising to me. ChatGPT is the most used, it seems like, at least by word count. There was some Grammarly. I did read, sort of auditing them. Some generative AI tools that I had never heard of before. From some of the data science people. That was kind of cool. Big words here, right? Helpful sometimes. And that people had mostly used it for writing, and then image popped up too. There's some stochasticity in how these generate, but Dolly popped up in here once or twice. But you see some things like Gemini pop out. Grammarly was a big one. People have been using Grammarly. So the next prompt was ideas from the video. This one was a little harder for me to interpret in terms of just the word cloud. So the big words there are obviously the interview one. I don't know why it left that in when I told it to leave the prompt words out, but sometimes that happens. And I also explicitly told it the two biggest words were Sam Altman. So that was one of the reasons I had to leave out the prompt words. But some of them snuck in some of my iterations of generating this cloud. I saw Sam Altman still in there. So I'm curious, anybody want to comment on what they thought of the video? Anything that stuck out to them, given that the word cloud is a little difficult to interpret? I think I already told you the one that was. It stuck with me, maybe because was the most unnerving. The fact that there's never going to be another person born smarter than AI. Um, I probably won't forget that for a while.
I thought it was kind of interesting when he started talking about the Industrial Revolution in this version from now, um, and how, like in 10, he said, I think he said, isn't, he can't even give an estimate on 5 years of where the workforce will be. And I thought that was really interesting and really cool. And then I got really scared when he started mentioning that, like, there are going to be jobs that are lost due to AI. And I mentioned to number 4, I was like, that was one of my big questions was like, what kind of safeguards can we put in place to ensure that the jobs that aren't taken away aren't the ones that are like crucial to critical thinking and actually need human perspective.
Yeah, uh, great insight. Good question. Existential concern. Yeah. Um, yeah, the way the whole interview sort of got derailed a little bit by like her timeline that she was gonna walk through. He was like, "That's not like it's moving too fast to project that far." Um, yeah, that was also sort of exciting to me, but also a little unnerving if this is the guy who's at the cutting edge, not being able to project where we might be in 5 years because he recognizes how fast things are going. And certainly he could be accused of being overly optimistic. Um, I don't know whether that's intentional business practice or just him really like loving this stuff. I think there has to be an element of the second part just because of who he is. Um, but there's been a ton of media attention over the last week or two about what a flop ChatGPT 5 is, right? The blowback for people's disappointment in ChatGPT 5. Personally, I think that's crazy talk, but um, interesting nonetheless. uh, AI impact on your work. A lot of these had to do with saving time, data analysis. Data is the biggest one there because it popped up in all kinds of like multi words. Data analysis, data cleaning. Um, but because we have a big contingent of people who are either in the data science program or the PhD program and going into research intensive areas, sort of not surprising. I thought it was interesting that positive was kind of big, right? A lot of people's bias was, I mean, if you want to call it a bias in terms of the responses, was mostly positive vibes about the impact on their work. Like it was saving them time, found it useful. Um, and then questions for the course, the last one. Um, the scientific one comes up. It was I think use got thrown out, but as a filler word. But like, how are we going to use it for scientific research? Was a common theme. Whether it was going to be able to think like a human. That's why human popped up. Um, Anybody want to voice their question? What you're thinking? Yeah.
I had a question as to whether different methods of like AI would give different conclusions. Which like if you were to use image processing for one method to reach the same conclusion as you would use ChatGPT, like would they reach the same conclusion? Especially if it's a known conclusion, like how do you know which one's right? And how does ChatGPT know it's right?
That's good. We're going to talk about even today, even how the same method won't give the same conclusion. ChatGPT won't give you the same response every time because there's stochasticity built into the model. Um, but yes, knowing how it's or whether it's right, that's the big question, especially when you're working at the edge of what you know And then the next step is like at the edge of what is known, right? If you're using this for research, in some sense, by definition, you don't know the answer. And so, at what level do you trust AI? I would say trust but verify. That's the answer. Um, and so we'll get to how do you do that throughout the course, but building the right testing environment is the
You were just saying, talking about how Altman was kind of optimistic in his view about AI's future. So it's not specifically about AI, but isn't it? Isn't that what he's supposed to be like? If he wasn't, and like you said, if he wasn't optimistic about it, if he didn't think that AI could do something good in the future, why would he even spend so much time developing it? Is it his responsibility, in particular, to think what AI is going to do in the future, or is it more responsibility of our policymakers and our regulators?
Ooh, that's a good question. If this was a political science class, we could spend a couple weeks on that. Like, whose responsibility is it? Uh, Excellent question that I don't have a good answer for. I could ramble for a while, but that would just be my opinion. But it's definitely a question that we need to think about because he's a public. Well, actually, OpenAI is a private company. It's mostly like I don't know what the percentage is exactly, but Microsoft owns a lot of it, um, or heavy investor, I guess I should say. Um, so he's driven by making money on some sense, and that's why I was saying he probably has multiple motives for being so optimistic. One is if he says, "Yeah, our Chat GPT is going to be a flop," people are going to stop investing in his company. Right? It is an arms race at this point, and it's not just corporate America that's in that arms race. So policymakers, if you take it away from the companies who are doing it for the money, policymakers have military concerns about AI. And so trying to regulate and put the brakes on something that they don't really understand, they say, well, actually, I'm not sure that's in the best interest of national security to do that. So we are in unprecedented times in some sense for this. Yeah.
Altman actually he talks about this in more of an optimistic manner. He does point out that like, oh, what is our society going to do? But he kind of mentions that our social contract between like resources has to change. That where we have to work on how to share this resource rather than who owns this resource, because in a sense it benefits everyone in similar ways. So he talks about sharing it rather than and like improving today's capitalism rather than just like resulting back to the industrial revolution where everyone's. I think he refers to the transistor era in Silicon Valley.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly right. Uh, that's good. And he talks about, the transition wasn't pretty for a lot of people, right? To the economic transition that happened in the Industrial Revolution, right? There are going to be losers, uh, and you know, can we mitigate that? Is I think he has some optimism for that. Uh, I don't know why I'm spinning. I can't. My computer doesn't want to start up the PowerPoint. If I close some. This reminds me. Everybody who had done the Google Sheet and given their access username as of around system, uh, and so you should have access to Bridges 2. So the way to know that is try to log into on demand. That sort of last, maybe second to last slide in the PowerPoint from Thursday. Um, we're not going to get on Bridges 2 today, but we will get on to Bridges 2 Thursday. You will have to be able to get that Unix shell in your browser to follow along with Thursday's lecture material. Okay. So already introduced this a little bit. So the topic for today is responsible AI use. Make sure. Oh, another sort of aside. The recording stopped. Probably most of you noticed if you went back and watched Thursday, it was truncated. Right after that is when I showed the Google Sheet that was being populated with your emails and usernames and stuff. When I uploaded the video, YouTube flagged it for its cyberbullying policy. Yeah, so like it's kind of funny, but also kind of scary that I knew YouTube was scanning the audio transcript. Like in that, if you've ever uploaded YouTube video, it has that delay while it processes your thing, and I thought that was mostly compression, does the transcription, make sure there's nothing nasty in there from the audio. It's doing way more than that. Like it is watching the video. It recognized from the video that I was showing a spreadsheet that had people's email addresses in it. Like that's, to me, that was another one of those eye opener, like next level Big Brother stuff. I'm okay with it. Like I just assume if I put it out there, Big Brother has access to it, but I didn't realize it could do it that fast, right? The number of videos being uploaded for their systems to be able to crunch through all that video and understand what's in it, wow. All right, so that was an aside. Risks and mitigations, ethical aspects, and then establishing the class guidelines. So first question, what is AI? This is audience participation. I don't see anybody doing ChatGPT to ask. Oscar. Yeah, we're gonna get there. So I think you hit one of the things that I want to highlight today is that when people talk about AI every day, sort of vernacular today, they are mostly talking about large language models. I'm not really asking here how do they work. I'm just asking, like, when somebody says ask you what's AI. If your parents ask you what's AI, what do you tell them? Artificial intelligence, yeah. Give them what the acronym stands for. Computer has a mind of its own. So it's doing something like what our brains do. I take as what you mean by mind of its own. This anybody have what's your wow moment for AI? Like, yeah, it's got a brain.
Whenever I used ChatGPT once, and I told it to check your work and see it go over. It got stuck, so I was like, it didn't really work. But just seeing it go over and over and over and over again, saying like, wait, that's not correct. This should be this, but then it goes back and tries again and tries again. And I thought that was really cool, just watching you like, wait, that's wrong.
Yeah, we're going to do a lot of that this semester. This morning's example for me was, it's amazing how many different ways you guys decided to number those prompts. Like ChatGPT had a really hard time understanding whether you numbered them. Because so the HTML embedding of the numbers, or whether you put it with a parentheses, whether you included it in the paragraph or on its own line. Try thinking about how you make a computer understand that these paragraphs are numbered, and if not every paragraph has a number, what do you do? all the rules that might involve. Okay? I mean, it took me and ChatGPT about 30 minutes to come up with a way to accurately count everybody's. So yeah, the going back and forth and saying, "Hey, ChatGPT, you didn't count these right. Why didn't you count these right?" And it goes back and looks, and it will tell you, "Hey, I missed this because." Yeah, good. Another wow moment. Anybody else? Yeah, Oscar. Yeah, yeah. They got in trouble somewhere around the 4.0 rollout with the model being too sycophantic. You got in trouble. People complained, um, and it was a real danger because it would just kind of encourage the person along whatever path they were going down. And if you have mental health issues, that might not have been good. That's kind of where they recognized the problem. Um, and they rolled that back. That's a tunable parameter. Yeah. Were you gonna say something?
Oh, I was gonna say that there's a woman on TikTok who, she went viral for her use of AI as a therapist.
Yeah.
It's kind of intense.
Yeah. Yeah. There's the. I mean, here we're going to be talking about its role in bioinformatics all the time. You'd be hard pressed to find a discipline that's not having to deal with it. Psychology is a big one, and AI chatbots that can do therapy. Um, so for me, while I was coming up, sort of half biologist, half computer scientist, um, I'll introduce you to the problem that was the poster child for uh, when are we going to get to AI. So what are these? Mugs. Like, no problem. You guys recognize these things as mugs. What is that? That's a cup. What is that? It, most people, I heard cup. Why isn't it a mug? The saucer? Okay, I think if I left the saucer out, you'd probably still call it a cup. It's a coffee cup. Good. Yeah. So that builds in some context for what's in it. This was the thing that we all through, I mean, even into the early 2000s, was a problem for computers, um, to like, why do you call those four on the your right mugs automatically, and that one on the bottom left a cup, sort of by default? They both got handles. They both basically, like, I could have tipped them all sideways so it's showing they're all holding coffee. Okay. But there's something about the, and if you ask ChatGPT now why, it's got a smaller handle that you hold with your finger instead of your whole hand. It's usually wider than it is tall. Like, it kind of understands. Like, I'm not sure I could have articulated why I called that a cup and those a mug. I could have come up with a list, but like ChatGPT has, it's almost like a hard coded. This is what's a cup and this is what a mug is. It understands that, and I need air quotes for understands. Uh, but that was the AI, and so that isn't, um, like, how we got past that is one of the things to sort of grasp today. Isn't because we gave the computer more rules to reason on. It's just that we gave it tons and tons of pictures and asked it to learn. Um, okay, so vocabulary. I know I will try to do a better job of posting lecture notes before class. But like I said, a lot of this stuff is brand new in terms of this course, so I'm developing lots of slides. And I trying to give you this in terms of a contextualization for a lot of terms that get thrown around in the AI world. Um, so LLMs, getting back to Oscar's response for what is AI, actually a pretty small sliver in terms of conceptually what AI might include. There are lots of AI tools out there that are not large language models. They're not geared toward how do I interact with the computer. And then at each level of this sort of hierarchy, you get narrower and narrower subsets of what we mean by AI. So machine learning is the discipline inside of AI that's sort of walking toward GPTs, but we are going to do a unit on machine learning applications. We'll talk about supervised and unsupervised learning methods and build what's called a classifier, letting the computer try to learn the patterns in the data so that it can tell you whether it's a mug or a cup, for example. Except we'll say whether it is a T cell versus a B cell based on its gene expression profile, or something that we know about the genetics. Neural networks are a specific sort of technique, approach, algorithm within machine learning that has been the most successful at developing the large language models. Deep learning is really just a neural network with more than one layer. The models that are in use today, like the one that underlies GPT, has many, many layers. Foundation models is kind of a new layer here. And so large language models are trained on text. We've sort of taken the approaches from large language models and expanded them to take other kinds of data. And these didn't necessarily happen chronologically like that. They've been sort of being worked on in different silos the whole time. But think about taking text or audio or combinations of text, audio, and video and images. The foundation models are these deep neural networks that build that connectivity, that quote unquote understanding that isn't just about text-based language. Okay, it has some understanding for whatever the media is. And then GPT is just a subset of large language models. It's the one that was developed by OpenAI, the company. Because ChatGPT is what we'll probably use the most, just I felt like you should know what GPT stands for if you didn't already. And it's key because all three of those words have a whole bunch of meaning that you could unpack. This isn't a class on AI. That's why we're doing it in one day. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of videos that you can go watch if you're really curious. And I think it's valuable to understand how these things work. But yeah, I'll get to that in a second. So the generative part, it can create new text. It's not just repeating what it's seen. It's not like it's ingested all of the internet and it's giving it back to you verbatim. It's creating new text on the fly. That's what the generative means. And so when we talk about generative AI, usually that's the kind of thing that we're talking about. It's able to create something that didn't exist before. It's pre-trained. So in the case of ChatGPT, basically trained on all of the internet. And then the transformer is the approach that is responsible for the boom in AI over the last 5, 7, 8 years. So this paper, Attention is All You Need, this might be hyperbole, but it might be the most impactful paper ever. And when we're looking back, it'll be interesting to see whether there's something that supplants the transformer model. Okay. So not this kind of transformer. That's what I think of automatically when I think transformer. Great set of movies. Well, not all of them, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about transformer architecture, and I'll give you the videos to really dig into it. But it's a method in deep learning for essentially an algorithm for the computer to understand context. A better one that was easier to train than what we had before. So that stuff about maybe the most impactful paper ever. This, how many of you have ever looked at Google Scholar? Just to be sure, okay? Most, maybe all. The currency, in some sense, of academia is citations, right? How many other researchers have cited your paper? This has 191,433 citations since 2017. That's so there's the sort of per year citations is called citation velocity. This has the fastest citation velocity of all time. So lots of people are working on this, lots of people are publishing, and they think this is an influential paper. That's all that means. And it basically replaced all modern LLMs are using transformers. ChatGPT is not the only one. Things like Llama, Gemini, Claude, Copilot, they all are based on this transformer architecture that was introduced in this paper. And in a nutshell, what it did was go from models that read text in sequence to predict the next word in the text to taking all the words at the same time and iteratively saying understanding something about their position and something about the other words in that text, how it informs any particular word. So the classic examples that they're in the videos is the word bank, right? The word bank has a very different meaning whether you're talking about money or you're talking about a river, okay? So what transformers did was give a much more efficient way to train computers to understand the difference in context of the word bank. Next question for you. What is a thought? This is a deep one. It's 10 o'clock. It's not too early to make your head hurt. What? The sentence even sounds funny. What do you think a thought is? String of ideas and emotions that are in your head. It's good. It's as good as any. I like. This is a philosophical question, not a bioinformatics question.
I mean, even the word idea is kind of a synonym for a thought, so.
Yeah. So what's an idea? Oh, you've already seen the rest of the slide. I feel like you cheated. No, that's good. That's one way, right? I'm just curious. I'm crowdsourcing for ideas here. Our thoughts? Yeah, crowdsourcing for thoughts. Thoughts about thoughts.
I know that like where this is going is that AI thinks of like how text is related to one another and like how words are related. I think that for us humans, it's harder to apply because we don't just run on text. But I guess it's still similar in that way that like we think about everything we've experienced text, eaten, watched anything, and then we correlate it with whatever we're activating.
Yeah, that's good. And the sort of the neuron answer is after you watch the videos and things about how these things work. Something that is an emergent property of these transformer based large language models is that they don't think linearly either. Uh, like, we're going to get to how does a large language model know something? Um, and it's not like there's a memory allocation in the computer that you can go to and say that's where it stored that knowledge, right? So this is the where I said you're cheating. One interpretation is a path of activations across the network of neurons in the brain. Each activation reflects connections to memory, sensations, context. So that is one potential definition of what a thought is. In machine learning, neural networks or deep learning models do something similar. Okay, they're sequencing words, which is a pathway through the language of neural networks. It's a pathway through different neurons, and how are those different neurons connected in the sense of this suite of neurons lighting up, having high weight, is representative of what I would call a thought. It is a sequence idea, okay? And that's what it's doing when it's telling you the answer to your question, okay? So the analogy, the more I understand about neural networks, the more this analogy strikes me. I still don't understand and I would say you would be hard pressed to find somebody who really understands how these networks work that would tell you, yeah, I understand how a neural network knows anything. I'll show an example of that in a second, but something to think about here. So here's a video.
There's a core concept in machine learning called high dimensional space. Here's one way to wrap your head around this concept. You can think about people as being high dimensional. For example, take famous scientists. You can think about when they were born, where they were born, their fields of study. Each of these is like a dimension of that person. These dimensions become difficult to untangle when you think about different people, because someone might be similar in some ways, but very different in others.
But this is the kind of thing you can use machine learning for. With machine learning, the computer isn't told the meaning of these dimensions, it just sees them as numbers. And it sees each set of numbers as a data point. But by looking across all of these dimensions at once, it's able to place related points closer together in high dimensional space.
Here's a concrete example where words are treated as high-dimensional data points. The important thing to remember is that we haven't told the computer the meaning of words. Instead, we've shown it millions of sentences as examples of how words get used. Here's a visualization of the results. We're looking at a subset of words that the computer has learned about. Each dot represents one word. Each word is a data point with 200 dimensions. Using a technique called t-SNE, the computer clusters words together that it considers related. And clusters form based on meaning, even though we've never taught it the meaning of words. Here is a cluster of numbers, months of the year, words related to space, people's names, cities, and so on.
We can also look closely at smaller sets of words. If we search piano, we can run Tisney only on words related to piano. We get clusters of composers, genres, musical instruments, and more.
And this approach doesn't just work for words. For example, you can also treat an image as a high-dimensional data point. Here's a data set where lots of people wrote digits between 0 and 9. People write in all kinds of ways. So the question is, instead of us needing to manually code rules for all the ways people write, could a machine figure it out itself using machine learning? Each image is 784 pixels. The computer treats each pixel as a dimension. Again, using T-SNE, it clusters these images in a high-dimensional space. We've color-coded them so that it's easier for us to see what's going on. And you can see groups of digits clustering together. It's learned something about the meaning of these digits.
These visualization techniques we've been exploring can be useful for all kinds of things. That's why we're working on open.
Whoops, I didn't mean to. So you'll see this data set of handwritten numbers has sort of become a intro to machine learning example. I don't know why that won't play again.
There's a
People's names.
on Tisney only.
Doesn't just work for words. For example, you can.
Oh, that's okay. The player's glitching on my side. That video was made, I think, right before the Transformer paper came out. So that was even before sort of the modern AI boom. Google was already thinking about how thoughts, sentences, generative AI could be represented as paths through this high-dimensional space. So this 3 blue, 1 brown, it's a YouTube channel. He's also got a website and everything. Grant Sanderson is the guy behind it. But these are really amazing videos. They're only about 15, 20 minutes, most of them. So they're in sort of bite-sized chunks. He tries to explain it on a, I wouldn't say a layman's terms, right? It'll definitely help you if you've had linear algebra, but you don't have to, I think, to get conceptually what's going on. These are a little bit older, so these, if I remember right, maybe 5, 6 years old. But they explain how training works in a machine learning environment, and how the network is built. And so what I was trying to go back to in the previous video when they were showing the number recognition example, and he walks through it as well, is the 780 pixels are each a neuron in the neural network. The amount that neuron is activated can be represented on a scale of 0 to 1. And so when you're thinking about image analysis, for example, if that pixel is off, it's a 0. If it's completely on, it's a 1. And so you can, hopefully then that helps you start to imagine how this network is going to be built. So for each image, I've got a pattern of which neurons are activated. And now when I'm training the network, this pattern of neural activity corresponds to a 3, because I've got this validated data set that says that somebody hand wrote a 3, that's a 3. And so the data is labeled. And so you train the network to recognize the pattern of neuron activation with the actual number. And then you can give it new numbers and it will learn, and that clustering that it was showing at the end, it has learned patterns of neuron activation that correspond to a number. That's effectively what the network that ChatGPT is working on, except for words. Okay. Anyway, this will give you background on deep learning. You can, like, this last one, I would say is the least necessary in terms of the understanding, but really good. And then these four are much more recent, like in the last year, showing how the transformer-based large language models work. And so, again, this isn't an AI class, so I'm not going to take the time to go through these. But if you want to feel more comfortable about using AI and understanding why AI might get some things right and other things wrong, or where is it more prone to make mistakes, I guess sort of demystify what AI is doing a little bit, or especially what ChatGPT specifically is doing. Take the time to watch these and try to internalize them. They're given at a very conceptual level, even though he's really breaking down what happens at each level of the model. Okay, and he talks about the math. He's a mathematician, and so he's showing the matrix algebra that goes on, but he's not actually doing it. It's all animated. Okay, and then out of this last one, which is a little bit of a summary, the large language model explained briefly, I just want to show one kind of clip, one part of that last one. Oh, and whoops. Okay.
Imagine being able to build an app with your name on it just by thinking about it. Meet Base 44.
So it says it on the slide. You guys are not seeing that. I don't know why that one doesn't want to play in text. But so the problem here, I alluded to this earlier. How does AI know stuff? Given the sentence, and this is a paper from last year where some people from, I think it was Google, one group from Google, one group from Meta, both showing similar things. How does it know stuff? They gave this example. Michael Jordan plays the sport of basketball. How do you know that? Right? And so they want to know, how does my language model know? Is there a neuron that says Michael Jordan plays the sport of basketball? No, there's not. But understanding how does it know that Michael Jordan plays basketball, it's not because it read 1,000 times this sentence, Michael Jordan plays basketball. Okay, and so trying to understand literally what's going on inside the brain of the computer is what we're trying to get at here. Yeah. Different one. Well, within some scope, you'll get different ones, and I'll show you exactly how it happens in a second. And that's a good reason why those videos are important.
You might be wondering if this central toy example we've been spending so much time on reflects how facts are actually stored in real large language models.
The toy example he's talking about is this Michael Jordan plays blank.
It is true that the rows of that first matrix can be thought of as directions in this embedding space, and that means the activation of each neuron tells you how much a given vector aligns with some specific direction. It's also...
So, unpack a little bit about the video. So, the transformer, that 2017 paper, that was the innovation, is made up of layers called attention layers and multi-layer perceptron layers. Okay, these are also called feed-forward layers, but there are two layers in the matrix that are the multi-layer perceptron layers, which is where most of these connections are made, are only looking at individual words and how well they can be predicted in their context. Not the attention layers are what draws the connections across. But the little dots in the middle, you can think of that as how much is a given neuron in this thing lit up. Okay.
Also true that the
Yes. Yeah, so can you see my cursor? Yeah, so those things, like these neurons right here, are lit up. And the thing is, you don't really know what those neurons correspond to. All we know is this vector of neurons is something about Michael Jordan. Okay, it may just be the word Jordan. Okay.
columns of that second matrix tell you what will be added to the result if that neuron is active. Both of those are just mathematical facts. However, the evidence does suggest that individual neurons very rarely represent a single clean feature like Michael Jordan. And there may actually be a very good reason this is the case, related to an idea floating around interpretability researchers these days known as superposition. This is a hypothesis that might.
So interpretability researchers, these are the people who are trying to figure out how does AI know stuff. Okay, so it's a whole discipline in and of itself. Like now we're trying to understand how does a computer brain work.
Help to explain both why the models are especially hard to interpret and also why they scale surprisingly well. The basic idea is that if you have an n-dimensional space and you want to represent a bunch of different features using directions that are all perpendicular to one another in that space, that way if you add a component in one direction, it doesn't influence any of the other directions, then the maximum number of vectors you can fit is only n, the number of dimensions. To a mathematician, actually, this is the definition of dimension. But where it gets interesting is if you relax that constraint a little bit and you tolerate some noise. Say you allow those features to be represented by vectors that aren't exactly perpendicular, they're just nearly perpendicular, maybe between 89 and 91 degrees apart. If we were in 2 or 3 dimensions, this makes no difference. That gives you hardly any extra wiggle room to fit more vectors in, which makes it all the more counterintuitive that for higher dimensions, the answer changes dramatically. I can give you a really quick and dirty illustration of this using some scrappy Python that's going to create a list of 100 dimensional vectors, each one initialized randomly, and this list is going to contain 10,000 distinct vectors, so 100 times as many vectors as there are dimensions. This plot right here shows the distribution of angles between pairs of these vectors. So because they started at random, those angles could be anything from 0 to 180 degrees. But you'll notice that already, even just for random vectors, there's this heavy bias for things to be closer to 90 degrees. Then what I'm going to do is run a certain optimization process that iteratively nudges all of these vectors so that they try to become more perpendicular to one another. After repeating this many different times, here's what the distribution of angles looks like. We have to actually zoom in on it here because all of the possible angles between pairs of vectors sit inside this narrow range between 89 and 91 degrees. In general, a consequence of something known as the Johnson-Lindenstrauss lemma is that the number of vectors you can cram into a space that are nearly perpendicular like this grows exponentially with the number of dimensions. This is very significant for large language models, which might benefit from associating independent ideas with nearly perpendicular directions. It means that it's possible for it to store many, many more ideas than there are dimensions in the space that it's allotted. This might partially explain why model performance seems to scale so well with size. A space that has 10 times as many dimensions can store way, way more than 10 times as many independent ideas. And this is relevant not just to that embedding space where the vectors flowing through the model live, but also to that vector full of neurons in the middle of that multi-layer perceptron that we just studied.
Okay, like if you've never even heard the word n-dimensional space. That might be a lot to digest. Anybody have an intuition? Want to give it a stab to explain what he just said? Why did I waste the 2 minutes to actually show you the video?
So an n-dimensional space, you can kind of think of it like coordinate plane. So that's only two dimensions, but then as you get to more complex maths and more complex problems, you need more dimensions to represent more variables. And so basically it's just saying that you have so many variables that you're higher than even 3D space. So that's why it's like really hard to like visualize.
Yeah.
So then when you were talking before about projecting things into higher dimensional space, that's kind of like a lot of machine learning models do in order to like classify things and separate them, and that's what LLMs also do to like associate ideas and stuff like that.
Yep. And what is the importance of the scaling of the, for example, vectors with the number of neurons? What he's talking about, the number of paths there, like these pictures, right? The maximum number of vectors is exponential on the n in the dimensions.
One thing that I think is important about it is that it's not linear, and I think that's something that people have a hard time in general. Anything that's not linear is hard to wrap your head around. But I also think that it is inherently hierarchical, which kind of seems a little counterintuitive with it not being a linear process when you're thinking in that n-dimensional space or higher dimensional space.
What do you mean by it's hierarchical?
Like sometimes, going back to Michael Jordan, maybe there's more. Did you see how those dots? Some were like white lit up and some were kind of gray. Maybe basketball was like lit up white, but tennis shoes was maybe more gray because people think basketball before they think tennis shoes.
So this is where why interpretability is a whole field. Like, and tennis shoes, I could go back to the mug example. What's a tennis shoe? And what I want you to think about is the number of points, neurons, is still relatively finite. I mean, it's getting pretty big. There are only, well, it doesn't matter. I don't remember the number, but the fact that the way it knows is not how many points of information, it's how many vectors in between the points. And think about the points as the n-dimensional space, okay? And so it's how many patterns can it recognize through that space. And that scales exponentially with the space itself. That's probably not helping based on the looks on your faces. So you've got the videos there though, and like this is the end of the last video that I kind of jumped ahead to, because I think this is one of the critical things about why AI seems so smart, because in the last 5 years, it's gone, the number of n's in the space has gone up by several orders of magnitude. And the amount it can know is those orders of magnitude raised to some exponent. Like that is it's n to that exponent, okay? So yeah, it's getting really smart. And that's why he says there's not gonna be another person born smarter than AI. What does smart mean? Something that, because we're running out of time, I'm not going to spend time on. But I've given you a website here. Also, let me open this just because the question has come up a couple times. Will it give you the same answer every time? So this is a cool transformer model that will do the large language model thing, the ChatGPT thing, in real time. And you can enter text here and see how it will okay, and so I just typed who is the cleverest. Let me blow that up a little. The problem is the size here. So it's going to look and try to pick the most probable next word, and it picked man. But notice that that is actually not the most probable based on its training data. And this, I think this is a ChatGPT 2 model so that it can run in real time on a browser. Okay, so not that many parameters. And the cool thing here is that you can walk through and it will teach you. So it's got an explanation, what is a transformer, how do transformers work. It'll walk through the architecture, what is tokenization. How many of you have heard tokenization before? Yeah. So it's like, it doesn't read words, it breaks them into tokens. Some words are their own token, but it will break contractions up. Bioinformatics is actually 3 tokens. And so anyway, getting in the weeds there. This is a cool website. Once you've watched the videos, to walk through this and actually see in real time how the transformer is working to generate the next word, and also illustrates why you could do this multiple times. So let's get rid of this and see if it gives me the, come on. I think because I'm recording, my computer is slow. It's trying to process a lot. So this time it picked of, okay? And parameters that, so there's this temperature parameter up here. There's a function called a softmax function that normalizes the probabilities at the end. And so that temperature influences how flat the distribution of probabilities are. And so you can, by raising the temperature, you can make the probabilities more uniform. So what it does is raise the zeros to non-zero numbers, and it will shrink the difference between high probabilities and low probabilities, so that the probability of picking some random word is higher. And like raising the temperature, what does that look like? You start to get gibberish, right? Because it's picking words that are not very probable to come next in the sequence. But you can tune it really low so that it always picks the most probable word, okay? In which case, then you're way less likely to get a difference given the same prompt, okay? And so one of the cool things, I'm not sure if it was in 4.0. I'm confident it's in 5, but there's so much that go, because it's proprietary, you can't really know. That some of these GPT models are learning from the context of the question how to modify the temperature. Like if you're asking it to do creative writing, it will warm up the temperature in its response transformer. Okay. If you're asking it a scientific question where you want to know factually what is the answer, it's going to turn the temperature down so that it's less creative with that response, right? which is kind of what you would want it to do. You're asking different kinds of questions. Okay, so again, one aspect of how these things are getting smart. Okay, so that's the background. Just thinking about the scale of these models, it's hard to know how many neurons are in a human brain. The number that gets thrown around all the time is 86 billion. ChatGPT, if you ask it how many neurons it has, it'll tell you it's hard to know. It's proprietary information. It'll give you a ballpark of, I forget, I think it was 200 to 600, I forget if million or billion. Anyway, it must have been billion because it was way more than we have. But what that means, hard to interpret. Just an interesting question in terms of what's the capacity to know stuff. I have a whole new understanding since I started studying how the LLMs work of what it means to know stuff. Like what is a memory? Also because my lab works on behavioral genetics and in beetles, it's an interesting one without a complicated brain. All right, so back to my goals. We don't have a ton of time left, which is fine because these are pretty straightforward. But talking about risks and mitigations for AI, everybody probably who's thought about or used it knows that it can hallucinate. It will invent facts. It will invent citations. It's getting better about not doing it as often, but still does it. API functions. Basically, it can invent functions that don't exist. The scarier ones are where the code runs fine, but it's subtly wrong. Okay, so it's not, off by one. This happens when, like, if it's sliding across text and it doesn't read the last thing in the text, stuff like that. It will misinterpret DNA versus RNA. Will not parse a file correctly, stuff like that. Just giving some examples there. Mitigating it, give the specifics and the I/O examples, the input-output examples, adding unit tests. So anybody, what's a unit test? Anybody know? This is a computer science term, really. It's a unit of the code. So like if you have a loop, you build a test just for the loop. Make sure that unit of the code is doing what you think it's doing. Okay, so breaking down the code just to verify the different chunks are giving you back what you expect. Verifying on a tiny known data set, cross-checking. This one's going to come back time and again, where how do you mitigate a lot of these problems? You build good tests. And then I put in red there, the bottom line is that AI is your co-pilot, not your autopilot. Okay, you are collaborating with it. You're not just asking it to do the work for you. Reproducibility and version drift, just showed you the example. You can get the same prompt and it won't give you the same answer. And updates. So you have to record the model and the version. If you're giving it parameters, saving. One nice thing about ChatGPT, I haven't played with many of the other ones as much, is you can go back to your conversations and it's recording it all for you. Okay, and so that in some ways protects you from some of these things like the version drift, where you can tell it which version to use. Yeah, we're kind of running out of time. We're going to get to a lot of these mitigation things that, if they don't make a lot of sense now, when we run into places where they could be an issue, I'll bring them up again and demonstrate what I'm talking about. Data privacy in bioinformatics is a big one. the prompts, so what you give ChatGPT, any files you upload, they can be logged by whoever the vendor is, in this case, OpenAI. So that includes if you upload controlled or unpublished data, they have that now. You can turn it off. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But especially if you're dealing with, some of you may in your research deal with human data, and so you've got to strip identifiers. You have to follow whatever protocols have been established for that experiment or for dealing with that data. The risk of training bias and representativeness. So train the data in the major chatbots is definitely overrepresented by well-studied systems. So humans, mice, flies, the models have been trained to make those connections, and so they will fail, give inaccurate information on non-model species often. The annotation tools, another one, this is one that I run into just because I've done lots of work with gene families. The interpretation of function will be based on whatever the homologs are in human, for example, even if you don't want them to be. So you have to be explicit about it. And then, tell it to give you an I don't know if it's not known. Because it likes to give you an answer whether it really knows or not. So ways to mitigate: reporting your training and your benchmarks. What are the gaps in your training when they're known? You can stress test on edge cases. I talked about this morning the ways you guys numbered your responses, full of edge cases. Okay, most people did it in a way that was easy to interpret, but I had to run examples of, hey, it scored this as a 0. Okay, go look at this and see, why did you score it as a 0? What's going on with the numbering there? And this is the collaboration. It's not saying that you have to invent it yourself. It's that you have to collaborate with the AI tool to help come up with a solution that gives accurate results. Prompting bias. AI tends to mimic the pattern and tone of the input. Also, an interesting side story there about the original models were trained on, for I think OpenAI's, maybe it was Google's, on the Amazon reviews, right? And so they found out in that network after training it that there was a neuron responsible for tone, like, and so they could tune it so that it always generated negative reviews or it always generated positive reviews.
The sentiment neurons that came out of the learning process, right?
Yep, the sentiment neurons, exactly. Ways to mitigate that is largely this is an awareness of your own prompting bias. Be neutral. You can ask, if it seems too sycophantic, ask it to argue with you. It will. Okay. Say, what's the counterpoint to this? What am I missing? I love asking ChatGPT, what am I missing? And it will give me a bunch of possibilities, sometimes that I hadn't thought of. And then getting good at prompt engineering, which is stuff we're going to work on. So one of my favorite quotes from a student, Nick was one of my master's students a while ago. After finishing bioinformatics, he came to my office one day and he said, I'm not sure I'm getting any better at coding, but I'm a better Googler. And so for you in 2025, that's going to be a better prompter, right? Not a better Googler. Things, again, we probably won't run into this very much in this class, but intellectual property leakage and licensing conflicts. Essentially, you really need to know what you're giving in your prompts. So if you upload a file, sometimes in the metadata, there may be information there that is licensed or proprietary information, and you shouldn't be giving that away. This also, back to the confidentiality stuff. I said OpenAI stores that stuff by default. You can go opt out so that it won't save your data, and I've given instructions for that in the slide, so you'll have access to that. It doesn't affect the tool's ability to understand context, so it's still going to understand your conversation that you're having with it, but it won't store those uploaded data for training purposes. This is just something you see sometimes where people accidentally, this has come up in the literature, where common way to test your model is to train it on one set of data, ask your questions, get the output, and then have a test set to see whether, for example, our classifier of T cell, B cell, when I give it brand new data that it hasn't seen before, does it do a good job of identifying actual T cells and B cells? Well, if I accidentally gave it some of that test data, now I don't have an independent test, okay? It's sort of like it's cheating, okay? And it's happened. That's why it's a risk. So being strict about training, validating, and testing, like having separate input files, is a start. And documenting synthetic data use. So making sure that it's clear what is simulated data and what is real data. And the last one, security and compliance. This is one that we probably won't have to deal with too much, but passwords, good example, right? You can have an environment file that's got a bunch of people's passwords. Like, don't show a spreadsheet that has everybody's email. Didn't even think about it. And then the last one, this is the big concern for me in terms of when I was redesigning this, because this is a known potential issue. The over-reliance on AI leading to skill atrophy. So really, this is the question. Will using AI make you dumber? Which is definitely not my goal, right? And the irony is AI can make you feel smarter while it makes you dumber. So there's this term, cognitive offloading. If you're having ChatGPT do all your cognitive exercise, you are going to atrophy. So I've given some papers here with their links for you to go look at. And this is, there's no way around it. This is as a warning. This will happen. If you don't learn to think critically, you will be a bad critical thinker. If you let ChatGPT do all your thinking for you, you will be less good at thinking. And so one of the debates that's going on in the educational literature right now is it a timing issue? Right? When do we teach people how to use ChatGPT? Like, you need to teach them how to think critically first, and then let them go use ChatGPT. And that came a lot out of this last paper here. They did a study where they asked people to write an essay, and they did it 3 rounds where they could only use ChatGPT or they could not use it at all. And the people who could only use ChatGPT had less ownership, they had less critical thinking measures. Oh, actually, they did brain MRIs. And so they had less actual connectivity in their brains after using those ChatGPTs. But then they flipped it, and on the last time, they said the people who had been using ChatGPT can't use it anymore. People who could only use their own brains, no ChatGPT, now you can use ChatGPT. And the people who did that actually did the best, okay, on that last one, okay? And so this is where this debate about timing and how do we teach to use. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to assume that all of you have learned some critical thinking skill up before this point, because I'm going to tell you in terms of course policy. I'll come back to ethics. We'll run through that at the beginning of class next time. Skipping right the course guidelines here. The first one, I encourage you to use it, but you got to document it and comprehend it. Okay. All right. So we're out of time. Sorry, we're a minute over. We'll come back to that, and we'll start doing Unix. So be sure you can get on Bridges 2 for Thursday.